And so welcome everybody. So this is the second professional registration session for April. So my name's Emma Wright. I'm the Director of Professional Development with AFA, and I've got Andrew with me. Andrew, do you want to give us a quick intro?
Yeah, good afternoon everyone. So Andrew Barrett-Clough, day job is working at Nottingham University Hospitals, but I'm Director of Skills Development at AFA, working alongside Emma.
Super, thank you. So as I said, this is the second session. So we're in the April application window. So applications are due in for the 30th of April at the latest. So this is the second session, which is generally for sort of questions and answers for people who may have started their application, of either found one of the standards a bit tricky or have some questions that they just want addressing prior to submission of the application. So we're happy to go straight into questions and answers, but can I just check whether everybody's been to one of the overview sessions of the process itself, or would it be helpful for us to do a whistle-stop tour through that as well?
I haven't. I've only noticed the professional accreditation stuff a couple of weeks ago, so I thought I'd join this one. So yeah, it would be useful.
Okay, no problem.
I'd second that, please.
Yeah, I don't think you're on your own there. So, okay, so we've got a couple of slides that Andrew can whiz through, which will give us an overview of the process, and then hopefully that will give you some time to think of some questions that you may want to address at the end, and we can pick those up. So if I hand over to you, Andrew.
Yep, no worries. Thank you. So I'll just take you through a quick kind of introduction to what we're talking about when we talk professional registration, and please post any questions in the chat as we go along, and then we can pick those up at the end of this, and then either come in with your hands up, and that'd be great, or we'll pick up through the chat as we go along. So the clue really is in our title. The unique part of what we do as AFA, as well as being a network and a community of analysts, is in the professional part, isn't it? So it's creating this route to professionalization. So we want to talk to you about what does it mean to go through this process of professional registration? How can we make this robust, but also as easy as possible for you? So when we talk professional registration, we do this under the auspices of FedIP, so the Federation of Informatics Professionals. So that's a umbrella organization. There's a variety of professional bodies then that sit underneath that cater for different kinds of professional groups. So we came in to fill a gap around the world of data and analytics professionals in health and care, but we've got British Computer Society and various others. So FedIP itself is not a membership body. We as the individual organizations are the membership bodies, and then we work to the overall standards that FedIP sets, and then we just translate those into our particular worlds. And FedIP holds the public register, so you can go and check who's on that. You can check that Emma and I and others are on that, and that's what you would join to show that public recognition of what you would achieve as a professional registered analyst or data professional. And FedIP sets the overall generic registration standards that then we are working to. So we've got a variety of levels now that we've developed over the past few years. So now we've got an associate practitioner level, which is where you come in. It's a lighter touch routine. That's where you're showing us that you are interested in moving on to one of the 4 formal levels. For associate practitioner and for reaccreditations, if you're already accredited, then we welcome those at any time. But for the 4 levels that we've got, as Emma said, we have windows for those now just to manage the process, make sure it runs smoothly, make sure it runs smoothly from our end as the Professional Development Committee. So we welcome those applications at 4 points during the year. We will then work on those within 2 months of you applying to make sure that everything's done in a timely manner. And I think overall, it's important to say that we want you to get through. We want this to be a professional and robust process, but we also want you to get through. So we will come back and contact you. If there's things that we think we just need to know a little bit more, it's not that we would reject you outright. We definitely would then enter into a conversation. So we will contact you rather than just say, no, you failed, you know, and you can't get through that time. There are ways to present your evidence if it's sensitive. So we know that's something that can come up, and we can talk about that. And then, as well as the AFA fee itself, if you're approved and you join the register, then there's also a FedIP fee of £25 a year as well. And you must be an AFA member when you apply and remain a member for the duration of your registration. So what is it that you need to do? What are the things that we've been developing over a couple of years, and we've had quite a big development over the past year or so under Emma's leadership to make things both, you know, robust, but also smooth, and learn from the first few applications that we've had over the last couple of years. So it's about meeting these standards. So the set of standards that we have that take the generic FedIP standards and then apply those into our world. So we look at the analytical approaches, the critical application of analytical tools, obviously the kind of things that are core to being a data and analytical professional, and then other things around the organization and planning approaches that you take to your work, how you work as an autonomous practice, and that depends on the level that you're applying at, which of those 4 levels that you're going for, how you show accountability, responsibility, how you work collaboratively, how you work in partnership with those people that you need to do that with, how you approach communication, your adherence to the AFA Code of Conduct, and also your commitment to continuous professional development. And that's all in the context of health and care. So we asked some questions about that as well. So we, for each of our standards, have this kind of framework. So we're looking across the different levels that we've got, from the practitioner, senior practitioner, advanced through to leading. We take the generic standard from FedIP, and then we just tailor it to our world. And then we ask some specific substandards there. And this is where over the past year or so, we've been back through those, learning from the first few years of us doing this, and we've streamlined those to get, because we had some degree of kind of overlap and duplication. So those substandards are the specifics then that you have to achieve through this process. So various ways that we do that then, that we ask you to evidence those standards. We've got reflective practice, which is really the start point and the heart of what it takes to do this process, building up that portfolio of evidence, and then the application form itself as well. So the reflective practice, and this is definitely at the heart of what we do. So it is about asking you to describe some pieces of work, probably minimum of 3, but you may want to do 3, 4, 5 pieces of work then, and you describe these using the format that we've got. And if you do this well, you will achieve many of the standards. You will already be showing us how you achieve those. So it looks something like this. So you take an area of work that's been significant for you, you describe the situation that you were in, the overall tasks that you had to achieve, specific actions that you took, and it may be within a team context, so the particular actions that you were taking, and then what were the results of that. And then you also, as you're doing that, telling us the story of that work, you're linking through to the items in blue, which will be linking through to your evidence. So you're saying, not necessarily against every element here, but against a large part of the story, you're saying, well, I'm giving you, as part of the evidence portfolio, the emails that show the work that you've done. It may be a screenshot of a dashboard, it may be a piece of code, it may be an attendance certificate for something. So you're showing us that evidence, you're showing us which of these items it relates to, and you're also giving us that link through to the P1.3, which is then that link to that particular substandard. So we can see that read through. It gives you the chance to tell us a story of a piece of work. And by doing this, picking some substantial pieces of work that you've done, hopefully you'll be able to link through to numerous of those standards and substandards. As well as that story, then we just ask you to reflect back on it as a piece of work, an area of work that you've been in. What went well? What didn't go so well for you? What did you learn? What would you do differently next time? And this is where you get the chance to do that reflection, isn't it? Because this is at the heart of being a professional. So it's not just about ticking a bunch of competencies, but it's also about how do you reflect back? How do you learn? So things that didn't go well, they can be great stories to get in here because then you can show that learning journey. So that absolutely can be perfect things for you to show. As well as that, then it's having got 3, 4, 5 of those reflective practice pieces. It's about the application form, and it's just about building up the evidence portfolio that sits alongside this. So for the application forms, we would, under each of the standards, then we'd ask you to describe for each of those substandards that fit there, give us some commentary, link it to the reflective practice pieces where relevant, and link it through to the evidence provided. So if you've got those good 3, 4, 5 reflective practice pieces, many of these substandards will be achieved, and all you do in the commentary is just put a line or two that just describes which element of the reflective practice that you're picking up. But it could also be that for some of the particular substandards, you don't happen to have covered it in the reflective practice pieces. That's fine. We just expect a little bit more commentary here then, because the commentary is where you'd be giving us the specific example to meet that substandard. So get some good reflective practice pieces, show the link there to, RP1, RP2, give us a line or two in a commentary about which bit of the reflective practice piece relates to that substandard. Just link it through to the evidence. All the time we're just seeing the link between these different elements. We also then, as part of the application, just to help you make sure that you've picked up all of the items, give this as a backdrop for us to keep coming back to, is then for each of those substandards, what's the evidence you've got? Which of the reflective practice pieces do you think it's relevant to? So you can check that, and you could see that you've got, for most of the standards, hopefully, you've got 2, 3, 4 reflective practice pieces that cover those particular substandards, and you've got evidence that will be going across those standards. And it could well be that evidence that you've got may meet several of those substandards. That's fine, but it just gives you a good cross check for you to see what you've submitted. So hopefully that's okay as an introduction, but obviously we're very happy now to go into any questions about that, or any questions about the process that you may have, and hopefully you're beginning to think about applying. So that would be great to get into the detail now. So hopefully that was useful, and fire away.
Thanks, Andrew. So we are open for questions. Victoria.
Hello, just say, yeah, that was really useful. I couldn't make the last one, so it was nice to have a quick recap. I just wondered if there was a Word version of the application form I could work from as well, because sometimes trying to type into the PDF is a little bit finicky, and I just wondered if there was one I could start piling my evidence into and making it a bit easier as a drop place for me, and then I can put it into the PDF if I need to later down the line. Really silly question, I know.
No, not at all. So there are Word versions available, because they're what we've used basis of the editable PDF. So yes, we can provide you with one of those for it will have to come through the hub in the editable PDF format, but I appreciate it may then be easier just to kind of collate that in Word and then upload it into the PDF on the hub.
I mean, we've got a question in the chat, haven't we? What PDF? So is this because we've moved over to the hub kind of this year, haven't we, to the FedIP hub? So before we were, you got to the documents through the AFA website, didn't you? And we had various forms there. So there may be a thing, if you've downloaded them before and you've been working on the application for a while, it could be that you're using a Word version from that, maybe.
Yeah, mine was off the hub a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, so the format itself is exactly the same. So the content is the same regardless of whether it's in PDF or Word, but the process for the hub is through that PDF. One from Richard. Yes, all the detailed standards are available on the website. So if you go to that page that Lizzie's dropped into the chat, you'll see a button for, I think, further guidance, and then a button to apply. So the application button then will take you into the FedIP hub, but the further guidance will then show you all of the various standards, and I think we have a document on there that compares all the different levels side by side. So yeah, they're all there as well. I'm just going to do a quick check now while we're online to make sure that's all as it should be, because as Andrew said, we have just moved over. So yes, I can. They're all on there.
Yeah, it's better to have those silly questions, isn't it? That's what this session is for, because there isn't, and it's entirely possible that as we're moving things over, we can miss things. So it's good to check rather than get to the end of a process and get to month end and have missed something. So good question.
Yeah, thanks both. I'm just finishing up a bachelor's degree, so I'm kind of looking for what to do next. So yeah, it won't be for another few months yet.
Right, thank you for that.
Good to stay in the swing of things. So. Stephanie.
Hi there. So I'm about to sort of undertake this process. I haven't started yet. This is the first meeting I've attended, and I'm, as I say, just trying to make a start. Can you offer any advice on where is a good place to start? I've worked in as an analyst and as a senior analyst for 10 years within ESNEFT, and you know, obviously there's a huge array of work that's kind of taken place in that time. And it's kind of knowing where to make a start and how to go about this in the most efficient way, I guess. So if you could offer any advice on that, that would be really useful.
So completely counterintuitively, I would say don't start with the application form. So start with your reflective practice. So think about sort of 3 chunky pieces of analysis or projects that you've been involved in relatively recently. So we generally see sort of reflective practice and evidence going back sort of 2 years, 3 years probably tops, especially as the further back you go, you know, the memory fades, doesn't it? But if you start with the reflective practice and kind of jot down those you know, situation you found yourself in, the tasks that you needed to do and the actions that you took and what your results were, and then start that reflective piece, you'll see that you start to tick off the standards. So Andrew showed in the presentation, we have a matrix of all of the standards and your reflective practices across the top. And if you start to tick off where you've hit those standards within your reflective practice, then that then will focus you on maybe some of the standards that fall outside of your reflective practice that you may need to find alternative pieces of evidence for. But that would be my advice. Start with your big projects and think those through in terms of the reflective practice templates, and the rest will generally flow from there.
Right, thank you. That's really useful, actually. So I've got in my notes sort of 3 to 4 good examples sort of those chunky pieces of work. Yeah, okay, thank you. That's really helpful.
And I think as well, then once you've come up with those ideas, you can then be making sure you collect the evidence, can't you? Because that can be a really time-consuming thing to make sure that, so you've got your 3-4 ideas that you'll be working on. It's then making sure that you've got the evidence, or that you can, you know, if you're applying in the next 3 months, you can just start making sure you get that, can't you? Because it can be really tough to try and go back as well. Remember, as you said, Emma, kind of, but also to get the evidence, isn't it? So at least if you've got those in mind, you can then start thinking about the screenshots or collecting the emails about feedback that you've had during the process, because that could be a really time-consuming process and take longer than actually writing the reflective practice pieces themselves, can't it? So start collecting the evidence once you've decided, you know, 3-4 things that you might well use.
Thank you. That's really useful.
Tom, I think you were up next.
Yes, thanks. I just wondered if you had any advice or recommendations on how much time to set aside for completion of an application.
It's a tricky one, that. So I think you have more success if you kind of block out maybe several sessions of a good quantity of time, rather than trying to sort of do it as almost like a drip feed. And I think once you get into the swing of the reflective practice piece, so if you put 2 or 3 hours aside to go through a piece of reflective practice, I think once you've done one, you kind of get into the swing of, you know, completing the other ones. And I think it's easier to spend maybe a longer focused piece of time rather than sort of picking it up and, you know, down every sort of few days or over the course of several months. Andrew, I don't know whether you've got any pearls of wisdom on that one as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's the challenge is probably just getting a few ideas down for the reflective practice pieces, isn't it? Getting 3, 4, 5 of those and then starting to work those up. But probably, you know, 3 long sessions, a couple of hours, as you said, will get the bulk of the reflective practice pieces. And you may want to spread that out. So you kind of start off a couple of hours, brainstorm those ideas about the reflective practice piece, sleep on it, come back, a couple of 2-hour sessions, then sort of working that up. That will probably give you most of it, won't it? When you then come to write, hopefully in the application form, that won't take too long. And then hopefully if you've been doing that over a couple of months period in the window, it's just gathering the evidence along the way. But hopefully if you've got some good things and they're pretty current things, you know, within the last couple of years, that should be an okay job to gather that evidence. So this isn't necessarily, it's not going to take a huge amount of time, is it? But as you say, it's having those dedicated slots. So 3 or 4 of those dedicated slots of a couple of hours each. I'd expect you'd be able to get a good chunk of this done and probably just have some evidence to chase up after that.
Okay, thanks. That's very helpful.
Richard, I think you are next.
Yeah, I've just put my comment there, but I think Andrew is just replied that we can just pick this one up. However, what I wanted to say is I don't have so much experience on NHS, on operations, for example, but I do support the background systems, especially the tool we use for our business intelligence, the reporting, that side of things. Now, I'm wondering, when you are doing the assessment to whatever level, what do you consider? Do you really put emphasis on, subject matter expertise, for example, on NHS operations, or do you take other considerations? So, for example, like me, I've improved the systems. There are quite a number of things I've done to those systems, for example, which has enabled the service to be much better. So will such a kind of improvements be taken into consideration if I try to apply to a higher level, for example? Or do I start from the lowest level and then work my way upwards?
Do you want me to start on that, Emma? And then
Yeah, go for it.
So we are 4 people working in health and care. So that's something. And there are some questions where we would just ask you to, tell us about the context that you're working in. But what you're describing will fit that, because that's just the kind of description that you've given of and this could be true of a variety of different data analytical roles, can't it? So we're just asking you then in the form to tell us something that that you are working in a health or care context. So the kind of organization that you're working in, the kind of things you're supporting, something that says, how this is contributing to what the organization is doing. But what you've given, just expanding on that is fine. It doesn't have to be that you are close to the actual decision making or close to the actual patient care. That's fine. We know that we've got a variety of roles, but you could say, as you just did, expand on that kind of story. What your role is. It is to support, build those systems which enable people to make better decisions. So that's absolutely fine. We're not going to be going into great detail of your understanding of healthcare context. We just want to know that you are working in healthcare and that you can tell us that you understand how your role fits into the work of an integrated care system or a hospital or a community trust, etc. So that would be perfectly possible.
Thank you.
Irina?
Hello. Kind of slightly similar situation to what Richard just described. So I'm not a data analyst anymore, has kind of shifted towards data engineering over the last 2-3 years. So I'm working through the application right now. I'm aiming to submit it in this April window. The difficulty I'm having, and probably a few of my colleagues, one of whom I can see on the call, gonna have sort of similar issues. So if you're a data analyst, that application kind of flows, the questions flow quite well. But if you are in a more technical role like data engineering, those applications, especially at the beginning, they are kind of, I've been trying to read between the lines and kind of describe it in that way. But you guys mentioned that you're working on designing questions for data engineering, but I don't think they'll be coming out fast enough for me to do it in April. So, so can you tell me if I'm wasting my time trying to read between the lines to kind of with the existing application?
No, absolutely not. So we've had successful applicants from your areas and those roles who have come through the registration process and have flagged that especially those first two standards are a challenge. Hence us trying to rework some of those to obviously appeal to all of the roles that we have that sit under that AFA umbrella. I would say those applications that we have had through, sometimes the assessor may want either to talk through with you your reflective practice, so we've just got that level of understanding, but no, absolutely not a waste of time. So please do continue with your application, and we may come and pick your brains on how we can best rework those so
yep, sure, no problem.
So we can appeal. So thanks.
And on what's kind of helpful here as well is now we've got the development of the National Competency Framework as a complementary activity, haven't we? So that is going to help. We still got our generic standards, but that's going to help flesh out some of the things that will be a perfect read across, isn't it? And that's going to help us understand all of the different roles that we've got. So it's going to help us expand from the data analyst into the scientist and engineer to use those examples and do the mapping across. And that should all become easier to move forward in parallel, shouldn't it now, and help that challenge that's just been identified.
Yes, that's what I've been using, the National Competency Framework, to kind of assess what level to go for, to be honest, rather than well, somewhere between the two papers.
And they've been developed in parallel, so they're not an exact fit, but there's a lot of, it's a very close parallel working, isn't it? Because there's been a lot of overlap of where the National Competency Framework started and AFA leading work on that, and then a lot of AFA board members, organizations, branch leads, etc., being involved in the National Competency Framework as well. So it's a naturally parallel piece of work. And so, looking at the National Competency Framework and the levels that are there, that can also be just a useful piece of intelligence as to, you look at the FedIP descriptions, you look at the descriptions we've got of levels, you can also look at the National Competency Framework, can't you? It's not that we 100% map them across, but they're quite useful for looking at what levels that you might think you are in the National Competency Framework. That's probably going to be a good read across into where you might be best placed going in the AFA standards as well. So it's all hopefully very complementary, and we'll make that increasingly so, won't we, over the year.
Any other questions from people? Oh, there we go, Stephanie.
Sorry, just thinking. thank you for all the questions so far. It's really interesting. I'm just wondering, and again, apologies if these already exist, and you know, I'm relatively new to all of this, but are there example applications that we can look at the various levels? I guess it would be good to kind of know how to pitch our own kind of application, our reflective practice, and make sure that we're hitting the right standard, if that makes sense. And trying to get it right first time when you're new to this.
Yeah, so we've got some sort of mocked up reflective practice examples, so sort of anonymous examples, and within the application form itself, there are kind of hints of what we're looking for within each of the standards. We're just working up a set of standards which will have some examples of maybe pieces of work and what we're looking for, but they're currently work in progress, so it won't be available for the April application window, but will be available for the next window in July, I think is our next one.
Thank you, that sounds helpful.
Oh, one of the things we added, Emma, was something about a word count, didn't we?
Yes.
Because
yeah.
that was one of the good questions that we've had of, you know, are we expecting essays in each box? And the answer is no, we're not. No. We don't want to read them, do we? We don't need that. So we have added a word count, haven't we, to each of the.
Yeah.
Is that? I can't remember how many. It's a few hundred words, isn't it? I can't remember how many, isn't it?
I think it's between like 200 and 300 words, isn't it? That ballpark.
Yeah. So it gives you a chance to write, you know, a paragraph or two, doesn't it? But we don't need an essay for any of the individual substandards.
That's good to know. I'm a fan of an essay, so that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Can't see any more coming through. If you do think of anything, then please feel free to email us. So you can use the info@AFRA-Analysts email address, and that will find its way through to one of the assessors. And as Andrew said, it's a supportive process. We will, you know, get in touch with you if we need any bits of extra. We'd rather give you the opportunity to, you know, give us that extra information or extra evidence so we can get your application over the line. Irina, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I wanted if you could expand a little bit more around the type of evidence, and Andrew mentioned something about how to present sensitive evidence and stuff like that. So, for example, some of my evidence is like contracts. So I don't really want to submit a contract, to be honest, if I can help it. Or where evidence might be, you know, like a contribution to strategy writing. Well, that document is rather long. I'm sure you don't want to read that. But how, you know, like my name pops up on it, like, I don't know, on page 50 out of 60, maybe somewhere in contributors. So like, how do you, what do you expect for those type of things? Please.
Yeah, so for strategy documents, you can either provide us with links, or if that isn't, you know, possible, then you can provide us with the entire strategy, but having that signpost that says I contributed to this section, which you can find from page X through to Z, that would be really useful. Evidence can take many forms, from minutes of meetings to emails to certificates of courses. So it's a pretty broad assessment process, and the variation of evidence that we see reflects that. Regarding sensitive evidence, we've had numerous applications where rather than submit sensitive information, the assessors had either a Teams call or a face-to-face with an individual where, you know, the geography works, for you to talk us through either a specific piece of work that you have done that's sensitive. So from the example you gave around some of the contracts, that would probably work in that respect, and you can put a note in your application that just indicates that it's sensitive and you're happy to have a further conversation around that.
Thank you.
Richard?
Yeah, I'm just coming back to that point which Irina just raised right now, the type of evidence. Now, to some of us, or rather like me, if I present a different kind of evidence, let me quickly talk about it. For example, there's a system whereby I improved the number of data sets that it reads every 10 minutes from 32,000 to say a maximum of around 15 every single. So there's a huge reduction from 32,000 to 15. However, how to present that evidence of 32,000? That 2,000 was around one year ago, because I mean, there's no longer backup for that one. The 15 also, there's currently a screenshot I can do that. So how do I convince you that indeed I improved it, or I really improved it, because now it's reading, instead of 32,000, it's reading 15. So it's far much faster. How do I convince you that indeed there was 32,000? Will you take my word of mouth?
So we may not just take your word of mouth, but if there isn't anything obvious, so you've mentioned screenshots, but obviously when you start these pieces of work, you generally haven't got in mind, I must do this for my AFA professional registration. So you'll have peers and people who work with you who can evidence that on your part. So that sort of independent, you know, person, maybe your line manager, who can just, you know, sign off, you know, a few lines that just confirm sort of the improvements that you've made. You might have it as part of an appraisal or a review, but we're quite happy to take that sort of individual evidence from, as I said, either, you know, a peer or a line manager, and we often see bits of evidence that are emails, you know, either with feedback to somebody saying, you know, this is a fantastic piece of work, we've seen this improvement over such a period of time. So something similar, you know, to that sounds like it would probably fit your situation, Richard.
Okay, just one more point, please. And again, due to information governance, it's becoming so difficult to evidence some of, you know, your evidence. For example, there might be some work which you have really done, but it involves a little bit of disclosing a little bit of, can I say what? Not really personal data, but you know, the works involved, which is like restricted, like sort of using information governance. So how do we go about this? I have evidence, yes, but there is some sort of restriction somewhere. So I'm wondering how to put it across to you, the assessors.
Yeah, and that probably comes back to the issue of sort of sensitive information, and the fact that rather than you know, breach any sort of confidentiality or IG regulations, just put a note in your application form that you know, the evidence around this is sensitive, but you're happy to have a conversation with the assessor, you know, to talk through that specific piece of work.
And it depends, you know, what that is, isn't it? Because you could show some of the code without showing the data. You could show a screenshot of a dashboard, but you could redact just, put some box over the actual patient identifiable bit so that you're not giving us access or anything, you're not showing us, but you're showing us the dashboard, but with a part of it covered out. We've seen that. Or yeah, as you said, Emma, it could just be about showing us on a Teams call, couldn't it? So then it's not recorded, it's not captured anywhere at our end. It's just we can see you talking through and get the sense of that. So there's various things I think we've had, haven't we? It could be the stuff that sits behind it, like the code, or a presentation about the thing. It could be something that's redacted, so it just covers out any, just do it as a screenshot and then cover off any of the patient identifiable, or yeah, we can have a chat and you can show us.
Thank you.
Okay. Any last questions for myself or Andrew? We've had some really good questions on this session. So we do record these sessions, so you'll see on our website earlier sessions. So again, with other people's thoughts and questions. Go on, Richard.
Let me not become too much. Yeah, there's something that has quickly, clicked on my mind, and this is how I want to ask it this way. For example, when we use public transport, we take it for granted that it's just mode, like London Underground and whatnot. So similarly, when people are using systems behind the scenes, people might be doing their own improvement systems, procedures or change to the code, but to the end user, they might not know, they might not appreciate what the effect, what somebody has done to improve some process or to improve the system. You simply use the system, you use the service without knowing the technicality that has been, the effort that has been made in the background to make this improvement. So for instance, when I use my system, my PI tool, which is called Creek, and maybe the assessor may not be familiar with if I explain the improvement I've done on Creek. How do you handle these things? I've done some effort in Creek, for example, and maybe you might not be familiar with Creek, but there's actually a very useful improvement I've done there, which has done a lot of good, but I don't know how to put it. It's just taken for granted.
Yeah, if you provide a bit of text around, so thinking of it in a reflective practice way, so understand why you chose to improve either a workflow or some performance. So if you were noticing that there were performance issues or things were running suboptimally, and then what tasks you identified that you wanted to do in order to try and optimize that process and those actions that you took. So as Andrew said, it may be you've tweaked some code somewhere, you've indexed something, and then what those results were, then that ties into that structure of the reflective practice, which the assessors will be looking for as part of your application. So that sort of performance improvement, service improvement absolutely fits with reflective practice and bits of evidence that we are looking for as part of that process. Does that help, Richard?
Yeah, very useful, very helpful. Thank you.
And there's probably something about, depending on what kind of level you're applying for as well, isn't it? As to if you're applying at the higher levels, well, probably in that case, we would be expecting that you'd gone to the stakeholders to get some direct feedback, because that should be part of what you do. If you've developed a major analytical product, you should be talking to the stakeholders, making sure that you get feedback. That's part of what we would expect for you to be operating at the leading level. But if you're coming in at the practitioner level, well, that may not be something that is within your remit to do. Well, there it's more than about, well, have you checked it out with your line manager? Did you confirm that, you know, what they'd asked you to do is then the thing that you've done, and you can show us that. So there's something about what kind of feedback it is possible to get will to some degree depend on the kind of level that you're working at, and therefore the kind of level that you're coming in to apply it at this at, won't you? Do you think that's fair, Emma? It's kind of where you might get that feedback, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So I think we will draw this to a close. Andrew's dropped into the chat the recordings of the previous Q&A that we've done. As I said, on that link that's also in the chat, you'll find both the link through to the hub for applications and also the other notes and pieces of guidance that we've got, which can help you and support you with your application process. And again, just to reiterate, if you do think of anything after this session, please drop us a line at the info@analysts email address, and we will come back to you on that. I'm hoping Lizzie's just popping that into the chat. But other than that, thank you very much for your interest. We'll look forward to receiving all your applications in due course. And thank you once again. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Nice to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.